Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. Today is Wednesday the 18th of November 2020, and in this programme tonight we'll be asking the very important moral question, and that is, due to the government's restrictive COVID-19 restrictions, we're asking, is this putting the spiritual health of our nation threat? And of course, you may have heard the news over the weekend, on Sunday and on Monday, that my co-host made the news for allowing his church to be open for a baptism, which attracted 20 police officers and also a huge amount of media coverage. And you've had a busy week, Regan, so it's great to have you back.
It's good to be back. Good to be back.
Not only did you actually make the headlines rather than being behind the headlines, you also had a birth of your baby boy, Randall.
Yeah, it's been an amazing week. The young fellow is right now. That's about 15 minutes after he was born. He was so alert, eyes open wide. Thanks to all the viewers who have sent well wishes and who I know were praying. Both Randall and his mum, Rachel, are doing really well. Value your ongoing prayers for them. But yeah, then Sunday, of course, what we'll be talking a little bit about happened. It was a very full-on day. A sense of spiritual warfare, definitely. Saturday night, I had probably about 2 hours sleep. Randall was a bit unsettled. And so I was so thankful for the help of God on Sunday, getting through what was a very unpleasant experience, and just have known God's help ever since. Tuesday morning, I heard the news that my maternal grandmother passed away. And, at the same time, just known God's hand in it all, his protection and his peace. So it's in that I rest.
It's quite funny because one thing I do in the mornings is get up and have a look at the kind of news headlines on my phone. So I kind of know what's going on. Scroll down, I saw...
Who is that?
That looks like Regan. And then
what's he got up to?
And I clicked on it. I thought,
scandal.
Okay, well, you got yourself into trouble now, being in the Daily Mail online.
Oh man!
But we're talking about here in today's program, I think, of a very, very important issue, which resonates with so many of our viewers tonight, and that is the fact that due to the government's COVID-19 restrictions, churches are being forced to close, and anyone who wants to attend church has to do so via Zoom, or many of them are not open. And are they not ignoring what I would call the spiritual health of the nation by not opening churches? Obviously, we know that COVID-19 is real. Yeah. I know people have had it, and particularly the elderly, it really does affect the elderly. We've got to take precautions. But at the same time, there has to be a balance, I think, between allowing churches to remain open so that people can pray and intercede for the situation the nation faces. On the other hand, also taking important guidelines in order to protect the vulnerable as well during this crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a few things that I think we need to consider here. There's, first of all, what is really essential? Why are churches open anyway? What I would say, let me clarify that a little bit. For anyone who might write in, yes, we know that the church is not a building, right? The church is not a building, it never has been a building. Church comes from the word ecclesia. Ecclesia simply means gathering. It's related to that Hebrew word, that from which comes synagogue. It means coming together, gathering together. So we have a gathering that it doesn't matter if it's in a church building proper, which, okay, you can make the case that church buildings proper come from more the Constantinian period of Christianity, but kind of similar to any other religious institution in some way, including synagogues. It doesn't matter if you're meeting under a tree, if you're meeting in a park. I've taken meetings under a tree in Africa and Mozambique before. You can be in a flat. I've done that in the Netherlands and in Germany, Austria. It doesn't matter, but the problem is the guidelines are saying you can't gather. You can't have church properly. Okay, well, we have Zoom, we have virtual stuff, but that's assuming that you have access to the internet. That's assuming that you have that privilege. One thing that has really been evident to me in this time is that lockdowns are very much a privilege of the middle class. So many people who have little access to these things have literally been imprisoned in their flats, in their small space with nothing like that. And so we have to take into consideration what is essential. Is the spiritual, mental, and emotional well-being of people essential? I think we have to say yes.
Absolutely.
100%. It absolutely is. And, without trying to make a comparison or without trying to sound like physical well-being and food is not important, it is. If Sainsbury's is open, if garden centres, which you could definitely make a case that, well, it's nice to have garden centres perhaps, they're not essential. If they are open, and they are, absolutely. If other shops are open, then why is it that churches are not? Because I would be very, very willing to wager that most church buildings are safer than a Sainsbury's.
Most probably are. But let's have a look now at some of our MPs talking about the need for churches to open, including our former Prime Minister, Theresa May.
My concern is that the government today, making it illegal to conduct an act of public worship for the best of intentions, sets a precedent that could be misused for a government in the future with the worst of intentions.
Every one of us in this House has received numerous emails and telephone contacts about the closure of church services. I understand that, and I'm just making a plea to the Prime Minister, would that be, or could that be reviewed? Because for many, many people, that's the only outing they have of the week, the only opportunity to have any contact with other people for prayer and contemplation as well. In Northern Ireland, we've been able to do that with the Mass, the face and the space, and we've done that, and the churches have been able to continue. Is it possible, Prime Minister, that could be looked at? Because I believe that people across the United Kingdom, Great Britain and Northern Ireland would appreciate that, especially England today.
These regulations will have a serious impact on faith communities and places of worship. There's real concern across faiths about the lack of consultation. I hope the government can urgently address that, including convening the Places of Worship Task Force.
So many of my constituents across many faiths have asked me to tell the government and the Prime Minister that collective acts of worship are essential and should not be made illegal by any government. They are an essential part of their faith and an essential part of their lives, and I ask the government to reconsider the ban on collective worship.
The leaders of all the faith communities have written to the Prime Minister demanding evidence of how it is that people attending church services are spreading COVID. There is no evidence. I know there's no evidence. The Chief Scientific Advisor of the government has confirmed there is no evidence. It is a fundamental human right in any society. We are signatories to the Convention of Human Rights. It is a fundamental human right for people to be able to go to communal worship. And for religious people, you can't just tell them that, okay, sometime in the future, you'll be able to go to religious service. That's not good enough for them. They want to be able to have that communal worship and to have it now.
And thanks to the Christian Institute for supplying that video where so many prominent members of Parliament are talking for the need for churches to be open, including that one being human rights. Just to remind you that we are live, we are interactive tonight, so I'd love to know your views and your opinions. Should our churches be opened? That's the big question for us tonight, and that's what we'll be discussing. Right, Regan, I need to discuss actually what happened on Sunday. Like I said, just Monday morning, waking up, seeing your face with loads of pictures kind of in the papers. I thought, well, you've definitely gone into the news and got this into the news, because I knew that you were opening your church on a Sunday. Now, it was for your baptism of your little baby boy, wasn't it?
No. It was actually a young man who recently came to faith, professed faith, just in the past few weeks, gave testimony. We'd announced it was happening, and he had family who were going to be there, and a friend, a Muslim friend actually, who was going to be there, and others were going to be tuning in on Zoom, not only from the country but from outside, and it was going to be very exciting. Look.
So take us through. Just take us through chronologically what happened. So you arrived at your church just outside Islington in Clerkenwell in North London.
We have a meeting.
Right. Yeah.
We had a meeting the previous Sunday. So again, not a meeting that would have been allowed. We had the meeting, and it was a powerful time. And people were collectively gathered to worship. We prayed, we read scripture, we broadcast it as well. We weren't hiding it. It wasn't clandestine or anything like that. It was very, very open, no problems. Truly a powerful time. And then sometime in the week, a friend and kind of colleague on a few different projects contacted me and said, Regan, understand that your church has been open. Would you be willing to go on record publicly and indicate why you're opened, why you're opening? I had seen this friend put out something in a private group saying, look, if anyone is interested in going on record of those of you who are meeting, because there are many churches that are open. There are many churches that are meeting in this way around the country. Would you get in touch? Would you, be willing to do this? And I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. But I prayed. I asked God that basically, okay, if this is something that would be good, let him come to me. And I got an email from him. And so, I responded and said, yes, I'm willing to go on record. Had a conversation with someone from the Sunday Times and from Premier Christian Radio. And then Sunday morning, I had been asked to talk with Radio 4 and did so. I don't know, perhaps it's the naivety of being new to all of this, but I was thinking, okay, unless someone is ultra malicious, there's not going to be much that comes of this. There was a very hostile interview on Radio 4. It was quite jarringly hostile. I was taken aback by how many press and how many police showed up. Because someone reported that we would be having about 100 people present. We never have 100 people present, and particularly in this time, we've taken great strides to make sure that we're sensible, that we're acting with care for hygiene, care for others. So yes, the police showed up. I want to be very fair to them, with one exception. The police were very kind, were amicable. A couple of them, I'm pretty confident, didn't even want to be there. We sought to make our case and to reason with them firmly. There are exemptions, very clear exemptions to public gatherings organized by philanthropic organizations, charities and whatnot, for support of vulnerable people. And we came to a consensus, a compromise, if you will, wherein 15 people, and we kept those who were in an older age category, older being a bit relative here, was the over 40s, so I'm not saying that's older. Yes, Simon and we were saying, you guys, okay, stay here. And then, so that's about half of the congregation is between 40 and 80, and about half is underneath that. And so we split it up, and a few of us went to a public garden, a few stayed behind. and we conducted some slightly truncated meetings, but we're still refreshed by being able to have that essential spiritual gathering with one another. And in the week that's followed, I've had so many messages of support from locals, Christians and non-Christians alike, saying, we stand with you, this is good, this is right, keep on. In this time, we talked about it before, we've been at the forefront in our community providing meals for local vulnerable people. We've been providing essential help for people suffering from mental health problems and loneliness. Even today, that was evident in our food distribution, some conversations I was having. We're right there, and I believe my heart's desire is that other churches would take this as an opportunity to say, what can we do? What can we do to be the light? And that whether or not you have a service in a full way as such on Sunday or not, that you don't find yourself content to just close the doors of the building that's in your stewardship and in your care, but that you find some way through which you can open the doors. Private prayer is something that's allowed. You can have a food bank. You can get in touch with your local mutual aid societies or whatever and try to form some alliances locally in your community for the good of those around you. God can and will work powerfully through that. He certainly has done at the Angel Church.
So two things I think we need to, this raises. Firstly, what is your response to the police presence? The fact there were 20 police officers that came to your door. I suppose that's the first thing, and their reaction to what went on. So we see some of the police officers there that were outside your church. So just talk us through how you felt when 20 police officers suddenly decided to turn up at your church.
I did indicate to the press, I didn't like the press presence there. I asked them if they would please leave. They said, well, it's our job, so no. It's like, okay. They said, what do you think of all the police here? I said, personally, I think it's a bit of an outrage that there are this many people who are here. I mean, I've been at murder scenes and attempted murder scenes with less police than that.
In an anti-terror raid, I've witnessed an anti-terror raid myself, and I've never seen 20 police officers descend on
Two vans, one car and in the immediate front of the church and another van around the side of the building. It was excessive, I would say. And, you know, it's one of those things that it makes a spectacle, but I think that's part of the troubling, the word someone used with me earlier, again, someone not even a believer, dystopian element of this is the heavy show of force that seemed a bit excessive. I'm thankful that we came to a compromise. I'm thankful that we came to an arrangement and a consensus on what to do going forward. I told the police, though, that while I believed that what we were doing was lawful and it would hold up, I believe 100% if we were to have had 30 people congregated together, and if they were to have levied a fine, and if everything was to go in that way, that we would have a case that would hold up in court. We just heard from some members of Parliament who made that case. There are many people in high places in government who do not believe these actions are right or lawful. So I'm confident it would hold up. But, you know, I said, okay, even if this is the law, well, I respect the law, and Romans 13, 1 Peter 3 both say that we should submit to the law, 1 Peter 2 rather, and it follows on into 1 Peter 3. The context there is not of wholesale obedience, because remember, Paul and Peter, they were regularly in prison. Why? Because they did not submit to the guidelines or the law that they were given. Remember, Jesus, he broke the guidelines. There was a leper. One of my favorite stories is a leper who comes to Jesus, and he knelt at his feet and pled that Jesus would heal him. And Jesus reached out his hand and said, social distance. No, he didn't say that. No, I'm not saying we're Jesus. Obviously, we have to take care, but he healed the man, right? So we need to not make such an idol of safety. That's what I told the people present. I told the police present that we serve a higher law. We serve a higher authority, and you know, one day they will stand before that authority.
Absolutely. And one last thing, I think, before we get on to the emails, which are really important. And were you surprised at the level of press interest in this story? Because it's one thing having a big police presence there. It's another thing to find yourself in your pictures in the kind of national newspapers and doing radio interviews and TV interviews as well.
Must have been a slow news day. I mean, honestly, 30 people gathering for worship. One thing that I would say, I woke up Monday morning to a lot of facts about myself and the church that I never knew. Just a lot of stuff that was being said out of speculation, and that's what I would challenge. I know the viewers are probably well discerning about that. Whatever you read, there's always a bit of spin on it, and the people who were present, who witnessed, were able to look and say, hold on, that's not quite what happened, and that's on both sides, so oftentimes the truth is somewhere in the middle. I was very blessed that our congregation responded well. We did not return reviling for reviling or insult for insults. There was a sense of unity. There was a sense of harmony, and it was evident that the police accepted. It was evident. Yes, we're doing good work. Now, some of the people who we've been serving in this time, one of whom came to Christ and was actually baptized, who has a history of addiction and other issues, said these people, they're helping extremely vulnerable individuals. They're a lifeline, right? So they accepted that. They could see that there was a reason for the hope that was in us. Here's some emails that we have here. Jane says, congratulations, Regan, on the birth of your baby boy. Thank you, Jane. Can we see a photo of him? We did show one, so if you maybe go back and...
there you go.
There we go, yeah. So there you are, Jane. Thank you very much. His name is Randall Barrett. And there is a story behind that name. You can find it on my on my Facebook page, Randall Barrett. I break down why we named him that. We also have another here. John MacArthur refused to close his church in America. That is correct, Marion. Les, thank you. Do you obey man or God? The government not allowing the body of Christ to meet together, to pray, to sing praises to God, to worship him, and to have fellowship cannot be right in the sight of God, as it does not agree with his word. It is the enemy that wants to stop believers meeting together, not the God of the Bible. Thank you very much for that, Les. And that definitely was behind some of what I was saying, that we serve a higher authority, and Christians do need to start asking the question, at what point do we say, should there be another lockdown or another and another and another? At what point do we realize perhaps there's something slightly insidious to this, to shutting down worship of believers? That's definitely something we need to consider. Ruth, it's a difficult one right now as the bar and restaurants are shut, unlike in the previous lockdown time when churches were still closed once they opened. However, for those without good internet access, face-to-face services might be their only form of support, and this lockdown is denying them that input. Not all Christians are young professional with multiple devices to watch online services. Very valid point. Graham says, no matter what the arguments for and against opening churches, which I accept is a valid debate, there's no excuse whatsoever for deliberately and willfully and knowingly breaking the law. Furthermore, to suggest that God helped you through prayer to decide to do this is sickening. My God believes in upholding the law of the land. Thank you very much for that, Graham. And just to reiterate, no laws were broken. The police moved on. There was no fine. There were no charges levied. In their opinion, at the end of it, it was a non-event. At the same time, the God of the Bible does call us in some occasions, inarguably, as in the case of Paul and in the case of Peter and almost all of the apostles, barring the apostle John, they were executed because they followed Jesus Christ and because they brought the law.
So if we take this example, we take the United States, your beloved country. Back in May, we had President Trump announced the fact that he was going to open churches because this was important to have worship and for people to pray, to intercede. And this was a fundamental human right, he mentioned. So what he did was open churches. He put pressure on governors of states to do the same, even though some liberal states like Nevada decided they wanted to actually not open the churches, but instead open huge, massive casinos instead. So what we're seeing essentially here is where government restrictions on dealing with COVID-19 and then preventing churchgoers from going to church, being part of a fellowship, having that friendship and support, and to pray through these issues, because these are incredibly dark and difficult times. And this is this is the only hope. This is the only hope for our nation. Is if they reached out to God, if they reached out to Jesus by saying, look, we need your help in a time of international and national crisis like we have now. But no, it's like we don't want anything to do with the church. We're having our freedoms curtailed in this battle against COVID-19. And the danger is that once your freedoms are taken away, you're never quite sure if you're going to get them back again because they're kind of cherished values. And when it comes to freedom of religion, and the freedom to go to church and to worship God, this is one of our key tenets of our democracy. You undermine that, then you undermine the rest of the pillars of democracy. And before you know it, you have an authoritarian regime. And this is the great danger that we're in, I believe. And this is why it's important that Christians should pray for the government, that we'd have peace, absolutely, because it's a biblical command, but also that we take seriously the need to help vulnerable people. Because how many people are suffering from loneliness? How many people are suffering from kind of depression or mental health or other issues that this lockdown's causing? So in a sense, yes, it's trying to defeat a virus, and that virus is very real. I don't believe it's as deadly as they make out, but I do believe it's real and does affect the kind of the elderly and the vulnerable, without doubt. But the vast majority of anyone who's young, fit and healthy get over it in no time. But the question is, to realise the spiritual importance of having churches open, I think is essential, but with important guidelines put in place. I mean, only today, Sky Sports News announced how they are in discussions with the government about getting fans back into the stadium. Now, why are no discussions being mentioned about getting people back into churches, which, sadly to say, is far, far, far more important than people watching football games.
The government doesn't make money out of it. The government doesn't make money out of it. This is not a priority. And you can look at how the different factions within the government, and I would say, it's clear that we have a law. There's by no means any consensus, even within Parliament, that the law is lawful. And so we have to weigh this up when we are faced with areas that are not matters directly of moral sin. Is this right before God? Is this right before God to go along with? And Hebrews 10 tells us that we're to not neglect gathering together, as is the habit of some. There were plagues that were rife throughout the Roman Empire. If you look at the Antonine plague, the Cyprian plague, you can also go back, even just 100 years. And with a few exceptions, Christians were at the forefront of caring for those who were in need, who were suffering, vulnerable, putting themselves on the line, putting themselves at risk. And I would say, who is there to harm you for doing good? That's what Peter asks in his first letter. But if you should suffer for righteousness' sake. And so, I believe that anyone who knows what we were doing as a church, anyone who knows us as a local church, and been thankful, as I said, for believers and non-believers alike, to come by and to shake our hand and say, thank you, we support you, we stand with you, because we know your heart, we know what you're seeking to do and the work that you're doing to care for vulnerable people. Simon, do you think there's something insidious behind all of this? I mean, if I'm getting from you right, do you think there might be some stuff going on in the background that would seek to snatch some of these freedoms permanently?
Well, I think what's been so good about doing this program behind the headlines is you can start to see world events move so quickly, and we're starting to see the jigsaw pieces being put together so we can see the kind of bigger picture of what's actually happening and what's emerging. And ever since we did that program together on the World Economic Forum's plans for a global reset, this has all been set in motion. So, for example, we see that President Biden has been chosen as the US president by the mainstream media, despite the fact the American Electoral College hasn't announced the actual winner. Vote rigging on a kind of massive scale, even in the sense that some of the computer rhythms are changing. For example, on one occasion, you got President Trump being 5,000 votes ahead, then suddenly that vote is switched to Biden, even though we're having the live broadcast the election results coming in. So we got this one. We've got in this country, Boris announcing, our Prime Minister announcing his Green New Plan for tackling the problem of climate change, which follows exactly in line with the World Economic Forum's Great Global Reset. We see that Dominic Cummings has been sacked, so we kind of realise then that the idea of having a kind of clean break from the EU and a Brexit that would mean that we would be an independent sovereign nation now is now under threat. And the world's moving closer and closer to globalism. And what we're seeing really is the whole infrastructure being built for the Antichrist, as described in the book of Revelation, in Revelation 13. And the one thing that's happening is the speed of events are absolutely extraordinary in how this is all being put together. So, of course, when it comes to the issue of Christian freedom and religious freedom, this is something that they want to curtail as much as they can. You stop people going to churches, you stop people praying, you stop people reading the Word of God. And essentially what you have is a diminished spiritual impact from believers in the land that makes an impact in the nation. That is what's being curtailed. So on the one hand, we're also looking at this from a purely humanistic viewpoint, is that they don't care. You know, we have very few leaders of faith in our parliament willing to stand on biblical values. So the dominant ideology is secular humanism. So there is no concept. Why would anyone want to go to church? Why would anyone pray to God? You know, these are the times we're living in. But I think we have to remember very, very clearly what the Bible teaches in the book of Revelation, that we may be living in particularly in the Western world, where the main ideology is secular humanism. That's putting man at the center of everything. But we know that after the first 3.5 years of the tribulation period, we have full-blown Satanism, because everyone who doesn't worship the beast or the mark of the beast ends up having their head cut off if they don't worship Satan the dragon. So we go from atheism, secular humanism, to full-blown Satanism. And that's something that I think we need to guard against, and I think we also need to speak up. And that's what I'm thinking, that your brave and courageous actions to have the church open and then to actually confront our national media, as it were, could be a catalyst for other churches and other Christians to stand together and say, no, we have to remain open. Yes, we will observe social distancing and guidelines, but you've got to lead from the front. If there isn't any momentum to do that, you're never going to see any change. And if people then are crying out in this country saying, enough's enough, then that puts pressure on our members of parliament, which forces our government to act, particularly if you get the media on side as well.
This is exactly why I was willing to go on public record, despite knowing that there were some associated risks. You know, you mentioned loneliness as a problem, and on the train earlier I was reading that the Minister of Loneliness in Westminster has said, like, you know, we've gone from, prior to the first lockdown, about 2.5 million people saying that they were suffering acute loneliness. Those people who go on record as saying that. Now we're at about 4.7 million who would agree that they're suffering from acute loneliness. You know, this lockdown is destroying people's mental and emotional and spiritual health and well-being in so many ways. It's robbing people of livelihood. It's taking the rug out from under them. It's putting many people, and I've met many people, our church has housed 4 different individuals made homeless during this space of time. 2 of whom, by God's grace, are now sheltered. The other two, not yet. But this is our basis. Whoever oppresses a poor man insults his maker. And what are we seeing to some degree? And I say this with much weight and a sense of reluctance, but I do believe what we're seeing out of Westminster is a large amount of action that is oppressing the poor and making others even poorer. But he goes on, while the one who oppresses a poor man insults his maker, he who is generous to the needy honors him. So our desire first and foremost is to honor God. That's from Proverbs 14:31. We have some more emails here. Congratulations to Regan on the birth of his son. No doubt a future huge man of God. I certainly pray so. And congratulations on his stance regarding his standing up for what's right by opening his church. At last, a church leader with the principles and courage to stand up and say it as it is. How inspiring. At last, a Christian voice. I'm sick and tired of our wimpy, pathetic so-called church leaders. At last, a true man of God who speaks out for all of us. He quotes Proverbs 28, verse 1, the righteous are as bold as a lion. Many, many thanks. God bless Jeff. I appreciate that, Jeff. Look, I understand, Simon, church leaders are being put in a really difficult situation here. We have to have boldness. What is your take as someone from the pew on the decisions church leaders are needing to make right now?
I think we've been coward. And I think it's important that church leaders speak up about the need for churches to be opened with obviously COVID-19 guidelines, but to keep them open, because this is so important for the spiritual health of the nation. This is important for people's emotional well-being, their need for spiritual nourishment and spiritual support, the need to be around other people, and it's vital that this happens, because I think we have to remind our government that this is a Christian nation. It's founded on Judeo-Christian principles. And it's important that Christians actually stand up and fight for these values, because if we don't, we'll lose them. And it looks like we're losing them because we're being so quiet. And that's why I'm so pleased that we can do a program on this one. I'm so pleased that we can actually discuss these really important issues, because this goes down to one of our basic human rights as Christians, and that's to be able to have the freedom to worship God and the freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. These are all cherished values in our democratic system that is also enshrined on our democratic institutions, which our government needs to be reminded of.
Kathy asks, how about small house churches? Often only 6 to 12 people. Should they be allowed to meet? I think so. I think so too. They're not, because you're not allowed to meet anyone outside of your house. So if you're having a house church, you're, great. I support that. I stand with you. That's technically not allowed. Anita, evening, Simon and Regan. Lovely to see you both. Congratulations to you and your wife, Rachel, on the birth of your son. Thank you. And well done for standing up for our faith. Here in Wales, we're out of lockdown and some churches are open. Things are very different, though. The churches and our spiritual well-being is vital. Man cannot live by bread alone. Food is important for nourishment, but we need spiritual nourishment too. God bless you both, everyone at Revelation TV and the viewers. Much love, Anita. Thank you so much for that, Anita. Hi from John. I believe Jonathan Kahn is correct in Harbinger 2 that COVID-19 is a shaking from God. Using some of the facts from the book which support this, I've evangelized with this info with some success. I believe this is not something nature has thrown at us, and indeed we have to recognize God is sovereign and in control in it all. I mean, look at the plagues on Egypt. Those were assaults directly on Egypt and its gods. There's nothing arbitrary about those plagues. Each plague was a direct assault on a particular and specific Egyptian deity. And it's just fascinating to unpack that. Why do we think that it's any different here? We've seen all of our idols and gods completely ripped away and destroyed. God is working. And so that makes this an exciting time, a time that we need to really really be galvanized and understand where we stand. There's quite a few messages here. It's a fundamental human right in a so-called free country to meet for worship. We aren't stupid. We can still be careful and responsible. But it's okay for pubs to open and allow drunken people to completely ignore safety. Madness. I would say that was the case previously. Pubs were able to open before churches back in, I believe, June. Pubs are not allowed to be open right now. So if you know of a pub that's open, that's not exactly.
50 police officers around the corner.
Yeah, right.
I mean, look, I got a lot of sympathy for the police. My father was a police officer. And, it's a difficult job. It's an extremely difficult job, having to deal with stress and aggro all the time. And I'm pretty sure that the police want to be actually fighting real crime rather than going round to stopping churches being open and actually sending 30 police officers to stop a small congregation from actually having a Sunday church service. It's not like, you're all... I won't. Actually, I'm going to stop myself from saying that. I could get myself into trouble. Essentially, I think what we're really seeing here is like an overreaction by the police. But the government is using the police and putting them in a very difficult position, whereby they are being enforcers of the COVID-19 restrictions and actually over zealous in their roles in tackling this issue. And then at the same time, knifings and stabbings and other serious crimes are being pushed to the side. That is a great concern as well, because there was an interesting article, and thanks to Lynn Marshall, a viewer sent me this letter, and this is from Alexander Connie. He's a senior constable from Coffs Clarence Highway Patrol, and that's in New South Wales in Australia. He says, opening letter concerning the police enforcement of ongoing COVID-19 restrictions. And he makes some really interesting points. He says, we are writing to you to raise concern we have about the use of police to enforce the ongoing restrictions placed upon our citizens relating to COVID-19, which has seriously eroded community trust in our great police force. He goes on to say that since the Attorney General declared a state of emergency for the novel coronavirus, our governments have acted upon certain powers to impose restrictions on its citizens, using the police to enforce their rules. Due to the novel nature of SARS, and he puts CoV-2 virus, most people concurred that certain restrictions should be followed until more was learnt about the virus. With the initial modelling from the Imperial College in the UK and Peter Doherty, the Institute here in Australia, indicated a catastrophic number of cases would severely burden our hospital system and could result in the death of up to 150,000 Australian deaths. It's easy to comprehend why our government should respond as they did and why the vast population would comply. He goes on to say that with these frightening projections, it became evident that we needed to find a way to quickly diagnose the disease. Yet the Centre for Disease Control in the US states that no quantified virus isolates of the COVID-19 are currently available. Even so, without the virus being isolated, the RT-PCR test was picked to become the golden standard for testing. And he really goes on and saying the detrimental impact that this is having. I'll just read from this section as well. He says, we note from the federal budget, a huge debt and unemployment is that our lockdowns have created a serious problems that now seem to overweigh the threat this virus poses. In our line of work, we know that social economic problems created here will transpire into greater threat down the track as people struggle to deal with the collateral damage this is causing. It goes on to say that we've been told that the advice from the World Health Organization is a key aspect to the National Cabinet's response. Yet, Dr. David Nabarro of the World Health Organization, WHO, said that we in the World Health Organization do not advocate lockdowns as a primary means of controlling the virus. So, I think at the beginning of this crisis, the whole population was willing to say, yes, We see this as a major threat. We see this as a major concern. We trust our government. We will go into lockdown. We will do what it takes in order for the government to actually defeat this pandemic. But we've seen with this second two that, yes, cases are going up and people are having it. There's no doubt about that. But the number of deaths is relatively low in comparison to what it was back in March. So surely the government should say, look, we need people to go out. They've kept the schools open, and the schools are where most of the viruses and colds and flus are spread anyway, so they take them home. And I think it's just putting sensible policies in place that protect the vulnerable and protect the elderly and those most at risk, and then allow everyone else just to carry on and maybe just get immunities from this thing without the devastation, economic devastation, the psychological devastation caused, and also the spiritual devastation being caused by not having our churches open.
Here's something that someone pushes back a little bit here. Thank you for this, Stephen. Simon, don't take my word for it. Take God's word. Wash your hands, Exodus 30:18-21. Keep your distance, cover your mouth, and avoid all contact, Leviticus 13:45-46. Anyone infected is to remain in quarantine for 7 to 14 days, Leviticus 13:4-5. The church are people, not buildings. God is right, isn't he? Well, I would say, Stephen, is, first of all, you're right. The church are people, but the church are not people in isolation. As I indicated earlier, the very meaning of the word church means gathering. It means gathering together. Meeting together is a core part of it, not in isolation and not in any virtual way. We wash our hands. We have hand sanitizer at the front of the church. We
got in the studios. There you go. Look.
Yeah, there
Luke
we are.
does a great job in making sure everything's clean.
Exactly. It's on our tables in front of us. We keep our distance. We have all except those who are exempt. And someone else comments on some people not being able to wear masks. Well, there are exemptions. Definitely, those people don't have to wear a mask. Avoid all contact. But remember the context of these. Anyone is infected is to remain in quarantine for 7 to 14 days. Again, it doesn't say we're not going to have synagogue. We're not going to gather together. We're supposed to gather together and take sensible precautions in doing so. So I appreciate that. Aileen says, hello, Simon and Regan. This is a godless country. We have a godless government. Can you ever imagine them getting together for prayer for guidance in this crisis? No. Yeah. Good for you, Regan. However, the church in general has been very submissive during this lockdown. No resistance whatsoever, unlike in America, where there is much more resistance. We need our pastors to get together and fight against this unprecedented imposition on our Christian freedoms. Most churches have tried to become COVID compliant, but it seems it's not enough. God bless both of you. Angela says, so proud of you for standing for our faith in Christ. These are certainly difficult times and our freedom is being challenged. Thank you for that, Angela. Blessings both, and it's lovely, baby Randall. I felt compelled to comment. It's very disturbing what happened on Sunday, and the church has and always should be there for whoever. We are the light. And there's a lot of vulnerable people out there. Do you think the established church capitulated too easy when we have the answer? Shalom. Absolutely. I do believe that there was capitulation, and it's a tragedy, an absolute tragedy. Norma, hello to the chap who said Christians shouldn't break the law. That means there should be no Christians in China, all Muslim countries, as Christianity is against the law. Valid. I've preached in Iraq and in China in multiple places and other spots where it's illegal. I guess I broke the law there too and dishonored God, perhaps. I mean, it's a valid point. I can't go to these countries and encourage people to endure in big suffering and then come here and there be an opportunity for faithfulness that God's convinced and convicted of and failed to take it. So I think that's important. So, Simon, there's just too much to go through here, a lot of encouragements. Thank you all for writing in. But, I mean, where we've come to on this?
Well, we've got about a minute of the programme left, so I think we've come to the end of the programme. But, no, can I say that I'm very proud of you. I'm very proud to know you. And your courage and your bravery and you're willing to put God first is an inspiration to us all. You're only 28, you're a young guy, and to have that weight on your shoulders, especially as a young father as well, is incredibly impressive. So I just thank God for you, because God has raised you up for such a time as this to actually declare his truth and the need to stand up on biblical principles. You know, this is masculine Christianity at its best. So,
Praise God.
Thank you.
May you receive all the glory for it. And I appreciate viewers' prayers and your love, definitely.
So I just want to thank you all for watching Behind the Headlines. Actually, this was in the headlines, as Regan was in the news this week for allowing his church to be opened. And it's important that during this time that we pray, we intercede, but we also stand on our biblical convictions, because this is what Jesus would want us to do. So I want to thank you for watching Behind the Headlines.